we're talking about defense, we're talking about security, you're also kind of talking about peace. We would like to have peace. And so I like these two images because I always reflect, like, are we going more towards Spock and, the computer likes us, it helps us communicate, it helps us travel, et cetera, or are we going more towards Hal? And sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And so as we think about these technologies, I'm always reflecting on that. So that's part of the conversation that I thought we should have. And the second image that I brought is this one, because as we think about Vannevar Bush, I mean, probably many people know about him, but for those who don't, he was the dean of engineering here at MIT. He created Raytheon. He was working on all kinds of stuff. He was at Tufts.
Precursor, grew up in Everett and Revere, went to Tufts, came here as a PhD, yeah.
And his sister, actually, I recently, another hidden figure, read about her, was his teammate in mathematics, and she was one of the revered professors at Tufts. That's part of why he went there. But a lot of people know this publication, Science, The Endless Frontier. Let's show of hands how many people know about, lots of people. This is the thing that sets us up after the war. But I wanted to really shout out this document. So there's here we're at MIT, this is where the RAD lab was. And this little essay that's inside of this yearbook of inventing radar during the war is sharing a story. And what it shares is, over here it says, before the war, science was poverty. Why would it say that? And that it was during the war that things came together. And I want to share this story because it's really the beginning of the scale of the American research enterprise. It leads to the founding of NSF and the funding and what becomes really graduate school in STEM at scale. Prior to World War II...
Which is in jeopardy now.
What's that?
The funding.
The funding, excellent. So prior to World War II, the reason why they say poverty is because you needed someone like the Medicis if you were Galileo. You needed to be wealthy. You couldn't get funding. And so people, of course, were doing science and technology, but it was a little more random. And what Vannevar Bush did is he went to FDR in the summer of 1940, and he said, "Sir, we don't have enough for the national defense." This is a full year and a half before Pearl Harbor. But he comes up with a list of about 5 things, and it's Manhattan Project, it's radar, it's jet engines, sensing and computing, ballistics and computing, and then also synthetic materials, and later they add all the medical stuff. And they found the National Defense Research Committee, which actually is the precursor of what becomes Office of Science Technology Policy, where I was based as the US CTO with the science advisor. And they found it, and FDR says yes in about 10 minutes. And they form a committee. The committee has all kinds of leadership from technology, from the National Academies, Patent Office, others, but it also has the president of MIT and the president of Harvard. MIT's president at the time is Carl Taylor Compton. So just sharing that they found this, and they start fueling what becomes the inventions of the technologies that we win World War II through. So then FDR writes a letter in 1944 to Vannevar and says, okay, if we could do all this, if we could invent all this during the war, what could we do this at peacetime? And he wants to know if this is a bit of an eye chart, but if you look at this letter, he's asking about how do we get all the Americans returning, all the Americans here, everybody to have jobs, to have opportunity? How can we increase the quality of life? How can we deal with disease? How can we deal with our youth? How do we help the youth be inspired? So this is really the framing. And so that causes Vannevar to write the essay that we use, Science, the Endless Frontier. The piece of it that is often left out is this little line in it, which is it can be achieved only by releasing the full creative and productive energies of the American people. Full is in everybody. And so I think that part of peacetime is really about that. And, we look at MIT's roots. I've got a little shout out in the green map to land-grant. We're a land-grant university. So during the Gilded Age, again, training Americans.
Civil War, I think. It was Lincoln who helped put in motion saying we needed to prepare people.
Yeah. And it's 1861, MIT's founded, we're a land-grant. That legislation comes in, and so every state gets a university. Sadly, the land was taken. That's why UC system is free to all Native Americans, and other of the universities are working on that.
UMass Amherst was ag school.
Yeah, so they got 2/3 of the money. We got 1/3 for the Massachusetts funds. So just shouting this out, And so just highlighting some of the people, from that war technology that was the invention of computers. And I brought this particular one since Vannevar said the full creative and productive energies of the American people. I don't know if you noticed something a little different about these computing photos from the early time, but one of them is Colossus, which becomes Manchester Baby. That's Alan Turing and Joan Clark and others. Grace Hopper in the Mark I. You've got here at MIT, the Whirlwind. We were just talking about it. So, of course, LIDS comes out of that work. And then at University of Pennsylvania,
so if you've eaten at Flower on Mass Ave, across the street was where Jay Forrester did.
Yeah, the one right there.
And my grandmother was a classmate of Grace Hopper's.
Great.
Said she did not like a liberal arts school and wanted out.
Grace Hopper is amazing. She said ships are safe in a harbor, but that's not what ships are for. So Grace, I'm bringing this image because it's full of women. And so you don't really think of women in the founding of computing, but these are many of the women founders. And in fact, the Duchess of Cambridge's great aunt and grandmother were code breakers at Bletchley Park, and these are some of those code breakers she recently met. And so I guess the thought is, how do we widen the aperture to include everybody in the full participation, the full creative and productive energies? And we just saw Artemis, of course, to the moon and back. That path that I just made was first calculated by Katherine Johnson. You saw her in the movie Hidden Figures. How do we get that scene where they're stopped by the police, if you saw the movie, and yet by the end of their conversation, they have a police escort? We want all Americans to have a police escort into the future. This is the Apollo 11 launch. Does anybody recognize what this story is or what this photo is? This is Ralph Abernathy and the Poor People's Campaign. And they're saying, thank you, we're happy, we're excited as Americans to go to the moon, but there's a lot of problems. Could we also solve some of the other problems, like poverty, inclusion? And so thinking about, how do we get everybody into the future? So that's what I do a lot of work on, and I don't know if people are thinking a lot, but a way to get to peace is to empower and have creative confidence for everybody. This is the president during science fair, and he's sharing with the kids, they're sharing their work, and he's asking them, how did you do this? They made a page-turning robot. And they said, we had a brainstorming. Then he's laughing, and he says, okay, and then what do you do? We built some prototypes. So if you think about being in first or second grade, why don't we do this with all our kids? Why don't we prototype and brainstorm for the future? We can work on all kinds of methods for that. Hackathons for foster care, a 10th grader teaching the police to code in New Orleans and releasing police use of force data, officer-involved shooting, making more peaceful societies, working on the Sustainable Development Goals by finding the people already fixing them and helping them, looking at all the Americans already having tech meetups and STEM programs and accelerating them faster. These are all the people all around our country doing these things. So just kind of pulling our attention a little bit, John, to the kinds of opportunities we can have. And I was just with Pope Leo in November on child dignity in the age of AI, and I gave him a book about Ada Lovelace, who, of course, is the founder of artificial intelligence.
Same time as Darwin, right?
Yeah, same time
more
as
people
Darwin.
know Darwin than her.
Yeah. She said, I wish to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system. We can figure out the math of the cerebrum like we figured out astronomy. And a photo with the Pope went viral because I said that her hair looked a little like someone we know.
Nice.
So, we did a lot of the early work on AI with the president. This is some of those early reports, and we did them through open town halls. So what I maybe encourage everybody just on this sort of fast conversation, think about who's not in the meeting, who's not in the room, who could you add, whose history's not told, and how do we bring the full creative and productive energies of the American people, the full creative and productive energies of the world's people, to bear on the kind of, what did the Pope say yesterday, magnificent humanity that we would want to have, and kind of turn the volume down on HAL and turn the volume up on Star Trek. When we were kids in Buffalo, we used to play Star Trek. Yeah.
So in closing, today we have a lot of people on stage talking about innovation, and a lot of people from this university working on defense tech innovation. I guess I wanted you to kind of channel Vannevar Bush, because he was treasurer of the university. He went to Washington. He set up the first funding mechanism to help put MIT in a position to do a ton of this research. What do you think he would say about how things have played out? Is this as he had envisioned? Are we a little bit off the path? I know he's not in the room to defend himself, but
we can't know exactly, but yeah, he set us up. I think he really understood how excellence comes from finding people and helping people bring what they're going to bring forward. The challenges come, during war, everybody rose and worked on these technologies, but then pivoting into the imagination that we have. So I think that he would push us harder to I personally call it widen the aperture. What is all this tech for? And couldn't be for, I brought some of the stuff out just for fun. Here's a Raspberry Pi. You have to carry these around. This is.
Who does not have a Raspberry Pi on them right now? Who does not?
This is an air quality
so
sensor.
A lot of people do, I guess.
Yeah, they do. Air quality sensor. So right now we're working with some kids in New Orleans, high schoolers, and they're doing air quality sensing networks for their own work on your hometown for your homework. So how do we do the same thing we saw with the image of the little kids with our high schoolers, get them interested in technology through topics they're worried about? There's a plant polluting them. Why don't I just measure it? So sort of teach them all the tools of the world, and let's work on peace and quality and those things as part of defense work. Yep. Because the more capable everybody is and the more included everybody is, the less need for fighting, and the more majority of people will have what they need and be working together and can push back on those who may be going in the wrong direction.
Ladies and gentlemen, Megan Smith, at a day where we're talking about the moment, it's important to understand where we've come from. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.